Governor Spanberger, thank you very much for being here and for your time. Okay, let's just get it out of the way. It was mentioned in the intro, union leaders in the Commonwealth are not happy with your veto of collective bargaining legislation that would allow public workers to form unions and do all the things that unions do for workers. Why did you do that after expressing support for such legislation during your campaign?
So I continue to support public sector collective bargaining, and I continue to look forward to a place where we'll have a bill that I'll sign into law. Importantly, I sent back valuable amendments, and that's our process in Virginia. The governor can sign, veto, or suggest amendments. I suggested amendments towards that legislation. They were summarily rejected. Those amendments were incredibly vital from an implementation standpoint, and took the feedback of localities and community members about what it would look like to implement collective bargaining in the public sector in Virginia. Just as an example, standing up an entirely new system as the chief executive who would be implementing it is a big and substantial shift. And so one of the things that I propose in the amendment is, as we are creating, we call it the PERB in Virginia, our Public Sector Employee Relations Board, that state employees who are currently the class of employees within the Commonwealth of Virginia that have absolutely no right to collectively bargain at the local level, that right exists. It's opt-in by localities, where state employees, the ones I'm most responsible for, would go first. So any hurdles, challenges, kind of getting any of the kind of practice and reps in for the PERB would be tested on the employees that I oversee. So by the point in time when our localities across the Commonwealth of Virginia would be implementing an entirely new system, we would have gotten through some of the hurdles. 18 months later was the delay. And I think that's a really straightforward example of the types of amendments that I put in place. Now, notably, unfortunately, in the conversation related to my one veto is lack of recognition of the fact that we are the first state in the South that has now implemented, or not implemented yet, but I signed into law, paid family and medical leave. Giving access to paid family and medical leave as we build out the program to millions of Virginians. I signed a bill to raise the minimum wage for all workers. I signed another farm workforce minimum wage bill, which importantly, we built such a broad coalition that we had support from labor and union leadership to the Farm Bureau. Heat protections for workers, wage theft provisions, the number of pro-labor, pro-worker, pro-Virginian bills that I have signed into law is substantial, consequential, and I am deeply proud of my record. And I look forward to having conversations with my counterparts in the legislature about how we can continue to move forward and get to a place where we can also create an implementable and durable program as it relates to public sector collective bargaining.
Governor, given everything that you just said, paid family medical leave, raise the minimum wage, laws on wage theft, why do you think there are folks in the labor movement who say that your veto was a, quote, betrayal, as I saw in one of the stories?
I would defer to them to answer that question.
Okay. Affordability is the catchphrase, the watchword, whether the president wants to believe it's a real thing or not. What are you doing for Virginians for whom affordability is more than rising gas prices? It's jobs, it's healthcare, particularly because of DOGE. You're a little more than 100 days into your administration. What are you doing to nip away or chip away at the affordability issue in the Commonwealth?
Well, so it's a all avenues approach. And so importantly, before I was even sworn in, I released my Affordable Virginia agenda in partnership with members of the General Assembly. All of those bills, the bills focused on lowering costs of housing, healthcare, and energy, passed through the General Assembly, 75% of them, in fact, with bipartisan support. Those bills, I have signed all of them into law. And just as sort of an example, on the housing side, allowing localities to keep affordable housing in affordable housing, protecting renter rights, so that part of the challenge, of course, is that once you face the potential of eviction, getting back into the housing market can be so much of a bigger hurdle than really overcoming potentially one missed rent payment. Giving localities, we're a Dillon Rule state, so giving localities the opportunity and the options to be a bit more expansive with how they choose to build, and ensuring that we also at the state level are contending with some of the call it restrictions or regulations that can sometimes impede housing growth. On the healthcare side, changing the way that a patient might have to deal with prior authorizations that can overall increase costs and deplete care and take away from that patient doctor experience. We've capped the cost of insulin out of pocket costs at $35 a month. We've also capped out-of-pocket expenses in terms of the types of plans that people can pay into. They would have to have limits on what's out of pocket. And we're cracking down on the middlemen in prescription drugs, principally PBMs. So that's on the legislative side. But then importantly, within my administration, I, via executive order, tasked all of my secretariats to do a full review of the work within their agencies, places where they can have a focus on affordability and look at even the not obvious priorities that they might be pursuing through the lens of affordability. And so every conversation we are having, whether it's education related or transportation and investment related, our state agencies and my cabinet secretaries are consistently and clearly focused on issues of affordability, whether it's affordability to the taxpayer, which ultimately does impact every individual household, or affordability in the way that whatever it is we are implementing from a state perspective might impact their paycheck.
What's the best idea that you and your administration has come up with so far that you think is something that your fellow governors should take a look at and replicate when it comes to affordability?
That's a good question. There's a couple different pieces where, I'll give a very simple example, and this does not solve the affordability question at all, but I think it's an issue of giving a little bit of consumer choice. We're the second state in the nation to sign into law a balcony solar bill. And so Utah was first, we were second, and that's allowing individual homeowners, renters, to be able to do the plug-in solar generation. In Virginia, it'll be legal as of July 1st. And so that's not going to meaningfully kind of upend everything within the Commonwealth of Virginia, but it allows for the individual consumer to lower their costs a bit. From an overall agency perspective and kind of cross the state government perspective, a lot of the work that we are doing within Commerce and Trade, which oversees our multiple departments, including focusing on housing, we are really trying to get aggressive in how we bring housing into the conversation of commerce and trade and economic development. And so I think some of the work that we're doing there, we have had really innovative ideas come from some of the investments that have come to and continue to come to Virginia. But also setting up, I'll give one more, a fund to be able to have varied housing and allow for localities and to attract the public-private partnerships with some capital available to them in order to be able to build housing in communities that otherwise may not be able to sort of fully bring an anchor of both capital and interest enough on their own.
Now, one of the things about the Virginia governorship is that by law, it is only one term, which means you've got one term to do lots of things. I've talked to some of your predecessors. For them, it's a bit of a liberating thing to not have to run for re-election. So given that, what's the best idea that another governor has done or is doing that you would like to bring to Virginia?
So because of this one-term governorship, it means that the things that you are planning for have to be durable. And so I think that among the best things that some of my predecessors have done and what I'm looking to do is some of the best ideas that I'm trying to bring to Virginia. And principally, these are sort of longer term investments, whether it is in transportation is kind of chief among them. You have to set up the investments, the priorities that you are making in a way where they are teed up for someone else's success. And so a conversation I'm consistently having with our Secretary of Transportation, because if you want to drive economic investment, if we want to continue to attract businesses, and I think the same can be true also in our investments in education, right? We are the number one state for talent. We want to continue to supercharge that and drive on that. But whether it's investments in our schools and in recruiting educators to Virginia and keeping them in the classrooms, or whether it is investments in roads and bridges and infrastructure, those are successes that you have to kind of tee up that someone else will take credit for, responsibility for, and making sure that it is teed up for success and not for someone else's headache is a principal requirement. And so I think of many of the things that I'm doing through that lens of how do I make this so durable that nobody else will want to sort of pull back or deprioritize something that I believe to be so important to the future of the Commonwealth and Virginians.
So Virginia seems to be always in the news, but I believe it was last week when the United States Supreme Court stepped in and sided with the Virginia Supreme Court in overturning the redistricting effort that was passed by the people of the Commonwealth. First, your reaction to that, and what does that say about the state of our democracy when the people have had their say and the United States Supreme Court stepped forward and said no?
So just, and you touched on it in your question, but just to reiterate the point, what was different about what Virginia was doing from some of the other states that we've seen on the Republican side of the aisle who have done redistricting is we could not take action without the vote of the people, a referendum, so similar to what California had to go through. Only ours is a multi-step process. The last process being a ballot referendum, which we did in April, which is an unusual time frame for a ballot referendum, but yet we still had extraordinary voter turnout. Of course, the people voted yes in that referendum. More than 3 million Virginians voted. And I say that because my disappointment with the Supreme Court of Virginia falls principally on the fact that we executed this election, which is a multi-tier process, goes through the General Assembly, goes through the General Assembly again, goes before the people. And millions of Virginians in favor or opposed cast their ballot, demonstrating their view, our shared view, that that election is legitimate. And the Supreme Court of Virginia determined that indeed it wasn't legitimate and nullified the results of that election. And so I find it extraordinarily frustrating. But my response to it has to be that now we have to prove the point by winning. Notably, we have 11 congressional districts. Of the we have 6 that are currently held by Democrats, 5 that are currently held by Republicans. Of those remaining 5 that are held by Republicans, I won 2 of them on the ballot in November when I ran for governor. And just, on the details of the politics, in a statewide race, you're not necessarily trying to win the contours of a congressional district. So 2 of those races are imminently winnable. And then arguably, when I won my first congressional race, my predecessor had won in 2016 by 15 points. I won in 2018 by 2 points. That's a 17-point swing. By those numbers, and with a president who is even more unpopular than he was in the last time we faced a midterm for him, we can win 3 to 4 seats in Virginia. And so while I have lots of feelings about the results of the Supreme Court decision, I am channeling all of that towards trying to encourage people to not feel depleted or to channel their worry, their anguish, their disappointment, their anger into volunteering for a candidate, supporting a candidate, and making sure that we win 2 to 4 of those races. On the current lines, it will be rough, but things worth doing are not always easy, and we have to do it.
How concerned are you that the president, on election day or even before, how concerned are you that he will send either the military or the National Guard or even ICE to polling places? And what can you do? What can you do, if anything, to stop him?
Very concerned. I'm also, my background's national security, so I think you should always sort of plan for every contingency that might cause a worry. Virginia, we have certain advantages. We have 45 days of early voting. And so enabling voters to be able to go to the polls over a period of time is an important step for us, and does create a slightly different experience than some of other states where you will see just lines around the blocks and blocks and blocks of people waiting to get into the polling places. You heard it first here. Tomorrow I'll be issuing an executive order. So, surprise, sorry to my comms team on this one.
Let it out, Governor, let it out.
In ensuring that we are putting out from the state level some guidance across public spaces, including polling places, of how Virginia state employees or people who are working in support of Virginia's state-run elections can react to, in this particular case, federal agents who might be appearing at a location and where the worry is that they're principally there to intimidate or scare people. But the reality is that there's a lot of, throughout history, we have seen efforts at intimidating voters. And my worry is that we will continue to see those heightened. And while I will continue to encourage people to vote by mail or to vote early, the reality is that the challenges and the fear that people might have when going to the polling place is real. And we have been here before in a totally different way, in a totally different context, but people have bravely gone to polling places decades in the past. It's what created change. It is what made Virginia, a place where progress was ultimately achieved, and calling upon that history of brave people doing the thing that they know is impactful, which is using their voice at the ballot box, that despite the concerns will be the encouragement that I continue to put in place, but also making sure that people know and where possible and appropriate, people have the ability to kind of push back and know what their rights are.
All right, I have a question from the audience. You can see it there, Governor, but I'll read it for everyone. How do you think about data centers? Loudoun County gets almost half of its tax revenue from data centers, but they are broadly unpopular with voters. How do you balance what voters want with what's good for Virginia's economy and budget, and do that in less than 5 minutes and 5 seconds?
Sure. And this is an interesting thing because it also becomes a question of what voters want. Voters may not necessarily want a data center, but they certainly want the iPhone with the data on it in their pocket, which I say not to be kind of sassy and disrespectful, but because it's actually true. And so sometimes the conversation has to be, if you like ordering things online or watching movies or, storing your photos in the cloud, like data centers are behind that and are essential to it. Data centers are a driver in many ways of Virginia's economy. And this example certainly gives Loudoun, but the example doesn't stop with Loudoun. Across the Commonwealth of Virginia, the taxes that data centers pay into local economies are substantial and essential to the ability to provide basic local services, funding schools and first responders. And so I continue to make the case that certainly Virginia is a place that many data centers want to come, has a lot of ability to say what we expect in terms of, the requirement that they pay their own share when it comes to energy utilization, or everything from the setbacks to the types of greenery that they put around their locations. And from a gubernatorial standpoint, being able to provide support to localities that really might not know what to ask for in those types of negotiations. But what I have incoming to my office so significantly is a lot of localities, because yes, many of them went to Loudoun first, but it is a lot of smaller, more rural localities that really want to bring the investment and the support that they bring. And so it is, I balance it by saying, yes, there's real challenges, but in fact, there's significant benefits, and it's about what local economies need. Now, I think localities should always have the final say. So I'm, as governor, would never force any particular type of industry or investment into a locality that doesn't want it. But I think that it is wrong for the state to preclude localities that do want to welcome data centers from being able to do so.
Governor, in the time that we have left, let's talk about the 250th anniversary of the United States, which is this July. Virginia's role in that anniversary is vital. How will the Commonwealth celebrate America's 250th anniversary? What are you going to do?
So our slogan is America Made in Virginia. Governor Mikey Sherrill has some feelings about that. But we have events and have had events occurring all across Virginia. On July 4th in particular, we have phenomenal events happening all across the Commonwealth, fireworks and communities that are all sort of registered with Virginia 250. If you want to go to the Virginia 250 website, there is a lot of information about what might be available, different tourist attractions, sites, locations that we welcome you all to visit. On July 4th, some of the landmark or kind of capstone events that will be occurring is at Monticello. There will be a mass swearing in event for new citizens. And so what better way? What better way to celebrate the founding of the United States or our Declaration of Independence by welcoming Virginians to Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's home, and having those Virginians become new Americans on July 4th. There's also going to be an event in Williamsburg, which of course is kind of essential to Virginia and U.S. history, the site of the original House of Burgesses. And there will be extraordinary fireworks there and in cities and towns all across the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Governor, luckily for you, we've got a minute, so I'm going to, luckily for me, you might not like this question, but final question. I just want you to keep your CIA hat on, because you're a former CIA officer. Were you surprised that Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz?
No.
And so, Governor, if you were in a position to get it reopened, what's the one thing you would do to get that done?
Not threaten to obliterate an entire civilization? I mean, not to make light of a very serious circumstance, but it is, I mean, it's an outrage the way the Trump administration started a war, then says they're going to end a war, then continues bombing a country, and sort of it is I think meant to be disorienting and confusing, but it is absolute chaos. And gas prices continue to creep up. Like $4.50 a gallon is crazy in Virginia, and it's hurting people. And it is a direct result of the bad choices from this administration.
Abigail Spanberger, 75th Governor of Virginia, thank you very much for the conversation.